All right, so this recording is going to be explaining the coordinate entry exercise. So the three types of coordinates that I'm going to go over today are, and I'll make this big for a second, absolute coordinates, relative coordinates, and polar coordinates. But first, before we do that, we have to set our page up in order to do this. So you can follow along at your computer if you want. I would take this opportunity to save what you're doing because we are going to open opening a new page. So save what you're doing, or you can just follow along and watch the video after. Totally up to you. What we are going to do first is set up so we know that we're working in inches. Because like right now you don't know what units you're working in, and I would like you specifically to be working in inches. So in order to do that, this is kind of the command that we need to follow. So in our typing bar down here, we're first going to type in the word startup, all one word. So STARTUP, enter. You can do this in your robot exercise. It's fine, just in the command bar. When you hit enter, I can't zoom into my screen so you can see, but what you'll see is the command bar will say startup, enter new value for startup, and then there's going to be brackets and a number. Now my number is 1, and that's because I've set it to 1, but you might have any number. You might have 2, 3, 5, whatever. What those are is they're different presets, so that when you launch AutoCAD, it'll be preset to either like default to metric or default to imperial or default to like popping up a window and asking you. What I want AutoCAD to do is I want it to ask you so that you have a choice every time you open AutoCAD. So what we want to change it to is we want to change it to 1. So in here you'll hit the number 1 and then enter, and then it should clear the startup in your typing bar. So I'm going to reiterate that. So you've gone startup, enter, and then the number 1, enter. That's all we've done so far. Next, we're going to open a new assignment. So in order to open a new assignment, you're going to go at the top, next to the big red A, top left, and then there's just like a little piece of paper that means new. If you click new and you've done the startup command correctly, you should see this dialog box that says create new drawing, and it gives you an option of imperial or metric. Now, if you don't have that dialog box, that's fine. That just means that you have to go back and do the startup command again. So like I see that you don't have the dialog box. So you're going to close that, go back to your command bar, type in startup. Oh, can you see your command bar? Yours might have disappeared. Type. This is type. Startup, enter, 1. Would you try one more time? New? No, you went open. Hold on. Go to the paper. Perfect. Okay, so imperial, I see most people have that if they're following along. So now this gives you the choice to choose imperial or metric. What we're going to do for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to pick imperial and then go OK. So now if you see along your tabs here, you have start, and then you have drawing 1, which should be your robot exercise, what you were just working on. And then you have drawing 2, which is like a new page. Now, because I like to see a grid, I find it helps me like understand where I am in space. I'm going to turn my grid on. Does anybody remember how to do that from yesterday? How you get your grid on? Yeah, do you remember? Yeah, do you remember which button? Yeah, it's the waffle button. So it's right next to model space grid. You can click there. You can also type in grid, enter, on, enter. You can also like customize your grid spacing if you want. So you can space it like every ½ inch or whatever makes you happy. So the grid's turned on. I like to work with the grid. I find it helps me navigate in space. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do split window so you can see everything that's going on. And then we want to, oh, hang on, that didn't work. Split, there we go. And then we also want to see this. Trying to. All right. So I guess first things first, like what is coordinate entry? What are we looking at? So in AutoCAD, you're looking at an infinitely sized Cartesian plane, or you're looking at like an infinitely sized XY graph. Now I'm going to use the term infinitely loosely because like I don't think that you could draw something larger than like our planet. I don't know that your computer or software could handle that. But like I guess theoretically an infinitely sized grid. And what we're looking at is we're looking at an X and then we're looking at Y. So it's like one gigantic graph. And you're plotting points on the graph and then joining them together with lines or arcs or whatever. So it's like it's kind of mathy if you think about it that way. Now, absolute coordinates, the first kind we're going to talk about, those are coordinates that are referring to 0. So if it's like kind of like when you're in math and you're like plotting points on a graph, it's like your coordinate would be 4, 5, coordinate 5 minus 8, whatever. You're just looking at plot points that refer to your origin, 0, 0. So if I was to draw a line, so I've just gone into my line command, it says specify first point. So for example, I could put in like, I don't know, I've got an example here, 4, 5. So 4, comma, important you put a comma and not a period, because a comma will jump into your Y command. If you put a period, it's going to give you a decimal option. So 4, 5, enter. And then it's like jumped my mouse to like 4, 5 on the XY graph. And then I'll go to 5 minus 8, just like the example. So the next point would be 5, negative 8. So that should be 5 spaces to the right and 8 spaces down. Enter. All right, now that worked. So it went 5 spaces to the right and it went 8 spaces down. That makes sense. Now, this might not be working for you. There was one command that I forgot to mention, is that you have to turn off your dynamic input. I kept that here. I wrote turn off dynamic input, but I didn't tell you. So you have to make sure at the bottom there's an icon here. I'll try to draw it. It looks like a plus with like a little rectangle. It's right here. And this actually has to be, dynamic input has to be off in order for all of this to work. So again, it's like a little plus with like a, almost looks like a low battery symbol. It's called dynamic input. If you hover over it, dynamic input, you want to make sure that that's off. Otherwise, not all your coordinates will work. So again, we've just talked about absolute. I think you kind of get that. It's like this is coordinate of point A, this is the coordinate of point B, and then it's going to draw a line between them. I feel like that's fairly straightforward. Is there any questions about that? So the next kind we're going to talk about is relative. So how relative works is just a little bit different. It's when you're entering your coordinate, and when you're entering your coordinates, it's from the last point. So kind of think of it like, I don't know, like you're programming a robot to walk somewhere. You're like in Sims, or like you're trying to give someone directions. So it would be, if we're starting here, so from this point, so in order to put in relative coordinates, you need to put an at symbol. At means like from the last point instead of from the origin. So we want to go from where we're standing, we want to go shift at. So if we want to go from this point, and let's say we want to go like 3 spaces up and 1 space to the right. So that would be, or no, we have to do our X first, right? So our X, we want to go 1 to the right. So we'll go 1 space, comma, we want to go 3 spaces up, positive in the Y. 3, enter. So this has gone 1 space up, or 1 space over and 3 spaces up. So it's like rise and run kind of thing when you're thinking about slope in math. And you're like, I didn't take math. Why are we talking about this? But I mean, it is important, and it's a translatable skill when it comes to drafting. So if we wanted to go to the left or we wanted to go down, we'd have to type a negative value. So let's do that. So I'll go shift at, let's say we want to go to the left 2 spaces. So go -2, comma, and then we want to go down, I don't know, like 8 spaces or something, -8, enter. And it overlaps this way because our slope is greater, or negatively greater. I hope some of this makes sense and I'm not just like saying a whole bunch of jargon. But the idea, again, absolute coordinates go from your origin, 0, 0, and then relative coordinates go from your last point. Now in drafting, I'm going to be totally honest, you're not going to use either of these coordinates, and I'll tell you kind of why. So first of all, when someone gives you a set of plans to draw something, because as a drafts person, that's what you do, you draw. Like someone gives you like something they drew on a napkin, and they're like, I want you to draft this up for me. It might not always be like a clear set of plans, but it's going to be like a part or a thing or whatever, and it's going to have measurements on it. What it's not going to be is a graph with XY coordinates plotted out on it. Like, it's very unlikely that someone's going to give you something like that. I'm going to be really honest. The only time you see stuff like that is like grade 7 math, where they draw a picture and they plot all the XY coordinates of the corner. Now, the only other time you might see something like that is if you're working in a CNC shop, because the CNC needs to know the XY coordinates of the corners in order to like input it into the computer. So the reason I'm explaining what absolute coordinates are is because it's unlikely you're going to see it, but you might see it. So now we get it. Relative is also unlikely unless someone's only giving you the lengths of the lines and no angles. I guess same thing, it would have to be plotted on a graph so you could see and count the spaces and figure out how long it is. unlikely. Like the most likely type of coordinate entry you're going to face is polar. So polar is, you use the at, so it means from the last point, and then it has a distance and an angle. So this is mostly how dimensions will be given to you, or measurements or whatever. So it's from the last point, what's the length of the line, and what angle from the last point. So if we go something like, we'll go from this point, and I'll zoom in here. So if we wanted to go like a distance of 5 inches and we wanted to go up 30 degrees, it would be at a distance of 5, and then you do like the is this the less than symbol, the little duck mouth facing, chomping to the right, at 5 to the, and then whatever degree you want. So we want positive 30 degrees, we would do 30, enter. And now what we have is we have a line that's 5, and I'll like prove it, I guess, just because I know you're all interested in that I'm not lying to you. So if I dimension this, I have in fact a distance of 5, and then my angle, I have to go into angle. And then an angle of 30, just as proof. So again, to do that, I did at 5, and then like duck mouth less than 30 degrees. I put all the angles on here so you could see. You can use negative angles as well. So you could use minus 30, so it would like drop down 30, or you could put that in as like 330 degrees. It's like really up to you. So this is like one really easy way of putting in coordinates. Now, as far as the exercise, what you're going to do for this assignment is there's four different shapes. So it starts like this. Number 1 says enter the absolute coordinate below to draw a figure. So this is all absolute coordinates. So your starting point is 2, 2. So you go into your line command, and then you'll type in 2, 2, enter. That's your starting point. Then it says point 1 is 7, 1. Whoop. So that would be 7, 1, enter. And then you're just going to go to point 2, 9, 3, enter. And then basically you'll keep typing this until you get to the last point, and it's going to make a finished shape. I'm not going to tell you what it is as a spoiler, but it'll make a shape. When it's done, you just hit escape, and then you move on to the next one. So the next one says starting point is 14, 3. So you go back into your line command, you type in 14, 3, enter. And then the next one is polar coordinates. The third one is relative, and then the last one is a mix of everything. So just remember, between your shapes, you're going to hit escape, and then you'll go back into the line command to start a new shape. When you're done, you should have 4 shapes, and you're going to hand that in. So to do that, we talked about that yesterday. You can go to your layout page. Why are you not letting me go to layout? Here we go. You can go to your layout page, double click, make sure all your 4 shapes are on here, grid on or off, whatever you want, and then you'll save it, and then you'll export as a PDF, and then you'll hand that in to me on Teams. That's what I'm more or less expecting of you. So you should see 4 shapes. They are closed shapes, so it shouldn't be like a line going off into the corner. If it's just a series of lines, it just means that you forgot to turn off your dynamic input. So again, that's that little button down here with the plus and the little like sort of low battery symbol, or slightly low battery symbol. The last thing I want to show you is what dynamic input is. So you're either, when you're working regularly, you're going to be using polar coordinates, or you're going to be using dynamic input. So if I turn on dynamic input, what you're going to see when I go to the line command is you're going to see this little thing now attached to my cursor. So the thing attached to my cursor says specify first point. I'll show you kind of here. So if I click on this endpoint as my first point, now it's asking me questions. So what it's doing right now is it's generating a box for length, and it's already calculating the angle. So what you can do in this circumstance is you can just like hold your mouse at 40 degrees and type in a length and hit enter, and it'll generate a line at 40 degrees for you. So you don't, it's like, it just kind of saves you one step. So if I wanted to go, I'll hold my mouse at 40 degrees, like so, 40, and I want to go a distance of 5, enter. Now that just gave me a length of 5 at an angle of 40, because it's like, I don't know if you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'll try to zoom in more so you can see. But there's like, you can see the, I'm not zoomed the right way. Here we go, this way. So you can see it's generating an angle to the right, and then to the left, you have like a dialog box for the length. Now, if you want to edit the angle, so like 30 is not your jam, or you can hold this down to like 2 or something, and you want a different angle, you would just put it in like a polar coordinate. So you would just go at your distance of like 6 to the whatever degree you want. So maybe you want to go straight down. That would be 270 degrees. You could snap it this way, or you could actually type in 270. And it'll go the length that you want. This is what you're going to use like pretty much all the time to draw shapes, is dynamic input. But again, I needed to show you all of these coordinate entry input ways because some software are different from other software. AutoCAD is an industry standard software, but there are many, many other industry standard softwares out there. So you're going to have to be like prepared to use different coordinate entry based off of like the assignment they give you, the software you're using. If you're doing hand drafting, you have to be able to understand kind of all three as well as dynamic input. So are there any questions about this? So my expectation of you right now is that you're working on your robot exercise. When you're done your robot exercise, you can show me if you want to. Otherwise, you can save it, hand it in, and then you can start working on your coordinate entry exercise. And then when you're done that, you're going to, same thing, save that, save as a PDF, and then hand it in. Any questions? All right. Thanks, everyone. Oh, yeah, listening. Okay. So the dynamic input key, that's a good question. You don't see it in the bottom toolbar. So mine right here, there's grid, and then there's snap, and then there's dynamic input. Yours isn't there? Okay, so I'll show you how to get it. That's actually a really excellent question. So bottom right corner, there's that 3-line icon. You click that, and now you have to find dynamic input and turn it on. What that does is that makes the dynamic input icon appear. So now that you've turned it on, you can also like customize the bottom bar. So if you don't think you need all of these things, you can go and unclick them. If it's like too cluttered, you can unclick the things that you don't want. Now that was a really good question. Thank you. Any more questions? I don't see any more hands. Awesome. All right, that's it. Have a good one.